Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder and chief ally of the Summit Leadership Alliance and your host to these Tectonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts where I'm bringing to you guests who are technology leaders, enterprise technologists, tech innovators, tech entrepreneurs, founders and CEOs of Canadian tech startup and scale up companies, but also other interesting guests who have meaningful things to share, things that are useful, usable, interesting, timely. And today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Paul Gibbons. Paul, thank you very much for finding the time to be with us this morning, or actually afternoon now.
Good. It's good to be here.
Lovely to
Good.
see you.
Yeah.
Paul, Paul is the author of the book called Adopting AI, The People First Approach. And this book was just published literally, I think, 2 weeks ago. I got a copy. It's a fantastic book. I immediately reached out to you, Paul, and said, hey, how about we have a chat about you and the book and what drove you to write it? And then, of course, explore a little bit about this. It's a phenomenal, actually, collection of perspectives that are superbly timely and interesting and relevant. And I do want us to double click on some of those. So, Paul, with that, maybe you can start by just telling us a little bit about who you are and your story, and then let's unpack
Yeah.
adopting AI.
Sadly, I'm 65 years old. It's kind of hard to do a brief version of this, but roughly speaking, I was a mathematician and a scientist. Now that's like 5 decades ago. And I had a certain amount of potential in that area, but I was seduced by Wall Street.
Yeah.
So I became a quant on Wall Street in the early 1980s, and I got very
Mm.
rich and very unhappy. And so life dealt me an interesting lesson there because I thought the rules of the game when I was growing up in the United States in the 1970s were, the more cheddar, as the children say they say today, that
Yeah.
you can gather, the happier you'll be. I found myself, making $1 million a year, being very unhappy in my 20s. In my 30s, I jumped ship and became a management consultant, an expert in risk management. So I'm still in the sort of math and science way. And I was, deep in options theory. And then I became a psychologist. So when I was 33,
Wow.
and trained myself in organizational change and organizational leadership. I ran a leadership consulting firm for a decade. We did a lot of partner development at some of the firms that you and I used to be part of: Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, IBM.
Nice.
That was my shtick, was partner development in professional services firms. And then I moved to the United States in 2008 and became a professor, kind of more or less. I do teaching around the country, workshops, keynote speeches, and all that kind of stuff. And I like writing books, which is kind of funny because when I was in my mid 30s, I sucked at writing. And I think I'm a pretty good writer. And Adopting AI is the latest in that. The previous seven
How
books
many?
are on some flavor of leadership and organization culture.
Yeah.
And one of them is Science of Organizational Change, is thought of generally as one that broke a lot of new ground in change management. It's still a bestseller today. It still counts as one of the top 5 books in change management. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what people say. I'd like to believe it's true. And Adopting AI is, my great hope, because I certainly put a lot of love into this book, and it allowed me to not just think about leadership and change management, but also business ethics, which I think is a key part of the puzzle, but also scenario planning. And so that was good fun. I think that's what you want to talk about. You want to talk about
Absolutely.
scenarios.
Yeah, I do. And as a reminder to our audiences, this session is going live. So if anyone has any comments or questions, please, of course, use Q&A function of the Zoom platform, and we'll do our best to address as many questions as we can. So, Paul, yes. So let's describe what the book is about and how it's sort of constructed, and let's indeed start with those scenarios.
I started with a book called Leading AI. So the first 3 chapters I wrote were on adaptive adoption, which is an alternative to change management. I wrote a chapter on AI strategy, which I think is interesting. It's kind of high level, but it's questions that you address all the time with your guests: buy or build.
Yeah.
Should I create an ecosystem or remote? Those are interesting questions. We handle those questions in a chapter on strategy. And the other chapter is on learning in organizations. And there's some some ways I think many corporations are anti-learning. I'll share those with you when we get to that part. So that's the kind of meat in the middle of the sandwich. On either side of the meat, in the first third of the book, is why is this stuff important?
Yeah.
Like you're hearing that this is Sundar Pichai, this is more important than fire and electricity. It's like, okay, buddy, I mean, you and I have been in business long enough to know, like, when a CEO says something like that, you want to take it with a hefty grain of salt. Was he right? Was he full of baloney? Why do we start with that? Is because, is this stuff worth talking about? It's risky enough. So if it didn't have tremendous potential for humanity, you just want to shut the whole thing down. It
Hmm.
does have tremendous potential for humanity, and it can do some amazing things for us as a species. Um, so that's the first third, is why and what
Hmm.
is this thing. The middle, as I've said, is something to do with the practical side of adopting it. And then the back end, what started as kind of one chapter on AI ethics turned into five. How
Yeah.
about that? So there's a chapter on governance, there's a chapter on AI law, and there's three chapters on the sort of meat and bones of ethics. And one of the interesting questions to ask is whether capitalism and what form of capitalism is a good, how fertile is that for the development of AI. I think it's a question that, because of right now, to shape that argument, AI is being developed and controlled by some of the richest guys in the world in Silicon Valley. They're the guys who decide what's important. Corporations are deciding which use cases. So we get a lot of self-driving cars, but are we solving the problems of sanitation and clean drinking water and healthcare in the third world? No. So it's pointed at problems that are really first world problems. I think we can do better than just do that. So we'll talk a little bit about that perhaps later on.
Yes, absolutely. So I know that the book starts with AI scenarios, and you are painting the picture, actually two pictures, contrasting pictures of potential futures, a dystopian one and utopian one. And I think that
Hmm.
I would love, Paul, if maybe we can do a double click on that. And I would love to get your perspectives on both. I describe myself as a techno optimist. I am a firm believer of, the philosophy of abundance. And my hope is that what we get ultimately out of this is that utopian future. And I really loved how you described what that actually means. So if you can we go and sort of share
Yeah,
that
I'd
and
be happy.
unpack that?
Shall I
Yes.
share a screen with the audience? I
Sure, let's
know
do
that.
that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see if this works. How does that look,
Yeah.
Dalibor?
Yeah, just yeah, if you click on that and it'll there we go. Now I can see it full screen. Yes. There we go.
Lovely. So these are the tensions for people looking at this online. Each of the seven dimensions has a kind of green and a brown way that it could go. Some of them are obvious. What can it do to the world of jobs? Evolution, not elimination, or unemployment and unrest. Will it destroy the biosphere, or can we use it to solve environmental problems? So those are fairly obvious tensions. What I ask readers of the book as they're going through it to think about is, which way are we heading in each of these? So are we heading more towards AI being used by the military? Would we know? Autonomous weapon systems that can kill people without, a human in the loop.
Yeah.
I mean, they exist already.
Yeah.
So it's a question of whether we see more of that, or whether AI will be used for the benefits of scientific discovery, fusion, and getting to Mars, and health care and longevity. And also AI in healthcare is probably one of the most exciting developments that your listeners will see.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that we'll see tangibly in the real world over the course of the next 5 years are going to be breakthroughs in healthcare, including drugs. But there's a risk, I think, that the problems are being. I once met the chief executive of Pfizer, and he said, if you want to buy Viagra, it's $30 a pill, but we sell stuff in the third world for $3 a pill. But still, pharmaceutical research and a lot of the wellness research that AI is pointed at again, first world problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Making, have you heard about this guy that takes 100 supplements before he, has his cup of coffee in the morning? He does blood transfusions. He's trying to live to 120. And
Okay.
I do want to say something that will really surprise listeners. People say doubling the human lifespan, right? So the human lifespan right now is like 79 or 81 if you live in Japan or something like that. Doubling it means, a human lifespan of 160. Is that possible? Because it
Yeah.
seems ridiculous to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That we could live to 160. Um, yeah, with a quality of life, and still be mobile and agile and, keep some of our marbles up top. Is that possible? And most people go, no, that sounds fanciful. Like, how are we going to live to 160? But if you think about it, what the lifespan was 100 years ago, I said a little longer than 100 years ago, but around 1900 or 1880, lifespan was 40 years. And
Yeah.
now it's 80. So it
Yeah.
has doubled
Yes.
in
Yes.
on a century scale. And I think that's an interesting thing. Now, how is it going to do that? Now we're going to get into some heavy biochemistry and molecular biology, understanding telomeres, on which are the protective end caps on DNA. Is it going to help, arrest the shortening of those, or perhaps maybe grow us
Yeah.
some new telomere? The other
Yeah.
area is mitochondria. When mitochondria malfunction, they create oxidative stress reactions inside cells and contribute to cell senescence. Is that something? So these are kind of exciting areas on
Yeah.
the forefront of longevity and science and wellness. But again, I worry that it's pointed at just a very few people. I think AI is very superpower cybersecurity attacks. So if you think your privacy was invaded by Cambridge Analytica or by Facebook or by social media, by the government or whoever you think, now it's supercharged.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that in phishing emails. When you get phishing emails in your inbox in the morning, you notice they're not from the same Nigerian one that you used to get 25 years ago. They're much more sophisticated.
Yeah. They
A
actually
lot of
have the grammatically correct sentences, right?
yeah, so, and what they're doing with cyber attacks and also with fake news is it's targeted, and AI is very good at targeting people with
Yeah.
fake news.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole
So
playbook. Yeah.
AI is an energy hog, this we know, but how do we begin to price energy costs into the costs of what they call in Silicon Valley compute? Well, that's an interesting question. Maybe it's not the right question, because maybe one of the questions is how do we begin to point AI at some of our climate problems, some of our
Yeah.
ecosystem problems, some of our biosphere problems. I think that's interesting. And I do have friends who are hardcore libertarian, ultra
Yeah.
conservative, crypto trading kind of guys who think that AI will dissolve, evaporate, make all our climate problems go away. Uh, and my question to them is always back is like, how quickly, buddy? Because those aren't just thinking problems. And then what does AI do to the world of work? We are increasingly isolated. We're increasingly remote from one another. Does it exacerbate, leading to this world of screen-bound solid? Or can we use it to connect us? And there are already people talking about the connectome as human brains connecting together much as we did. So I think these are the 7 scenarios we debate in the book. I asked listeners to look at that and say, A, where are we? And which way are we heading? You
Yeah.
know, in calculus terms, the second derivative
Yeah.
as well. Which way are these heading?
Yeah.
And I would say, what's your thought? I mean, as you look at these, are
Yeah.
we heading to
I
which?
think that we are actually meandering at this moment across both left and right. There is exploration happening in both. And I think that we are sort of meandering. My biggest, quite frankly, hope is that we have now entered the moment where across all of our sciences, all of us, but all of them, both sort of both the core ones, physics, biology, chemistry, the but also social sciences. We are, I think, entering this moment where every scientist all over the world will be able to surround themselves with the best scientists possible in their field and adjacent fields. And that the quality of science done that way, when each scientist is surrounded by a polymath that has
Yeah.
access to all of the insights and all of the research at fingertips and can do the deep research and analysis. To me, that is the biggest promise for humanity, I think, at the moment, that we could actually go through scientific breakthroughs in 2 years that would have otherwise taken us 50 or 100.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
then who knows actually what comes out of that, right?
Well, we don't, but
Right?
it could be really exciting.
It could be, it will be, because I think that I don't think there is any way to go back. And what I also love, you mentioned, Paul, the risk of our AI being focused in a particular self-serving direction for a small class of people who own it. Sure, that's a risk. But what I'm seeing out there in the markets is democratization and proliferation of different AI models and systems coming from different geographies. Even we have DeepSeek from China, right? That came up as a completely open, very, very
Yeah,
effective
I'm not
model,
surprised.
right? So now, here is the good news that I think about it. I'm going to get your perspective on it too. That democratization now actually allows pretty much everyone to have access to these polymaths at at close to or free. Now, like in 2025, now, free. And it could have gone completely different. It could have been closed, protected, government owned, or one corporation owned system that is actually dominating, that could dominate us. But we already know that's not the scenario we're looking at as humanity. We're looking at this distributed, close to free access for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. It's one I maybe missed, actually. Maybe I'm a little bit too pessimistic in that because it is a democratizing force, just like the internet was. So even though
Yeah,
there's a lot of internet wealth concentrated in just a few hands, Jeff Bezos, for example, and I guess a lot of people went broke in the early days of the dot-com bust. But in a sense, the internet as a tool is an extraordinary technology, if you
yeah,
think about it, from a millennial kind of perspective, that the world can be connected. That I used to say in one of my talks that someone in Uganda with a keyboard can connect to the Library of Congress, or the most
yes.
important scientists in the world can connect with other researchers across the world, can connect with other business people across the world. I grew up like 70, we just couldn't do any of this stuff, right? You had to pick up a telephone with the
Yeah, oh
dialing things,
yes, of course. Of course.
and pay $6 a minute for a transatlantic, connection.
That's right.
Um, well, what you say is really interesting, and I'm really excited. And what you said about science is very exciting. So,
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I'm a business guy, and I've been in business since 1980, since I joined investment banks in 1980. So my whole career has been spent in business, with a little bit here and there in academia. But I'm not most excited about the business use cases, like optimizing, logistics or supply chain, the marketing function, or doing some things a little more cleverly in HR. That's great. And it will make companies more money and more productive and more efficient. That's great. But what I'm really interested in is what it does for our species. And I guess
Yes,
that's the
yes.
kind of subtitle of the book, is People First, is like, I'm really interested in the scientific stuff. Like, I'm really interested in what it's going to do for wellness and longevity. I'm
Yeah,
really
yeah,
interested in if we could point it at some of these third world problems with, sustainability, and with drought, and with clean drinking water, and with building infrastructure in the third, if we could solve some of the humankind have eluded our solving over the course. I think that I'm very excited by that. And it's not that I'm just like super duper egalitarian. We got plenty of poverty right here in the United States, right? I mean, there's an incredible level of poverty in the United States for a country as rich as it is. Let's do something about that. Let's do something about homelessness. Now,
100%.
one of the things Dario Amodei, and I want to recommend to your listeners Dario Amodei, because he's the chief executive of Anthropic, and he's not as kind of prominent as Sam Altman. I think he's a good deal smarter than Sam Altman. And here's why. He's both the most wide-eyed, starry-eyed techno-optimist, and he's also super cautious. So what he says in an essay, which we use a lot in the book, in an essay called Machines of Loving Grace, is he says most people underestimate the huge positive potential that this thing has. So he's like Sam Altman,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, and he's chief executive of, I think they're the second largest or third largest kind of LLM
Yeah.
at the moment. But he also said we misunderstand the risk. We miscalculating the risks at the same time too. He says we're underestimating the risk profile of this thing. And he was the only one CEO of that whole chain of Silicon Valley CEOs that was actually in favor of AI regulation that California tried to pass, that it couldn't pass for various reasons. So let's not go down that rabbit hole. I recommend The Machines of Loving Grace, which is a free essay that you can download online from a guy who, is one of the leaders in the field. And it was very exciting. And it kind of informs my thinking, because I like him. really excited about, he's a biologist, right? So really excited
Yep.
about all of that stuff and really worried that it could be misdirected for some real harm in the world too, which we go into in the ethics chapters in the book. So
Yep.
we talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this. Let's go in and unpack a little bit sort of what would the reader see sort of chapter by chapter in this in the I'd love if you can sort of walk us through the material because I've read it and it builds so lovely. It's like if you want to know about the status of AI in the world at this moment, like this book actually captures it all so succinctly.
Yeah. And I don't want to lose Sebastian just asked a question in the chat. So I'm happy to do as you suggest, and let's have a discussion with Sebastian in a bit as well.
Yeah.
So you think we could go through, or which bit do you think would be most interesting to your audience right now? Should we talk about some of the early work on the why of AI, the
Yeah,
promises?
yeah. The why, the what, that first opening, I think, opening few chapters. I would love if you could give us your perspectives and highlights of each, and then we can stop and chat. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I
So,
hope this isn't too much of a distraction for business users. This is a science nerd talking to you here. Is why is this? This perhaps helps answer
and
your question,
Paul,
Sebastian.
sorry, it's actually it's not showing as a full screen. It's showing as a presenter's mode. So if you can, I don't know if you can actually flip it into the presentation mode so that I can see it full screen and my audience.
Oh, I see. I do beg your pardon.
Let's
How's
see.
that? Is that better?
Um, it's not actually. Let's see if you can do the. This is probably. This is going to probably be okay. Let's see.
Let's see if we can do this. How is that?
Let's see. It's coming. Let's keep it like this. It's not perfect, but it's better. I'm
How's
seeing
that? How's that? Is that perfect?
this. Yeah. Let's do it like this.
Let's soldier on. So one of the things that I think is one of the things that powered the scientific revolution. Why did science explode like 1500, 1600, 1700? Is there were two scientific tools that we know about, and you learn about them in first grade, it's the microscope and the telescope. Why
Yeah.
is AI like the microscope and the telescope? Is it gives us another way to see the universe. Like you can't study cells if you don't know they exist. So with the development of the microscope, I think it's around 1540, if I recall correctly, we began to see cells, which opens up this whole new world. Like we didn't know those things were there. And we
Yeah.
thought diseases were caused by spiritual humors in the air or misalignment of chakras, or depending on which part of the world you lived in. Now we see, oh, there's these things called cells,
Yeah.
and that the nature the reality that we see walking around day in and day out is actually not really not reality, but there's another reality that's
Hmm.
just below that level. And any first grade kid can see this. And the same is true with the telescope. You begin to look at it, and we used to think that why are the things, the dark areas in the moon called seas? The
Yeah.
maritime,
Exactly.
yeah, because we thought there was water up
They look
there.
like yeah.
And there were lots of theories. And then you get a telescope and you say, well, actually, that's mountainous rock and there's no air at all.
Yeah.
These extra organs, as they were called by people at the time, is almost like attaching an extra sense organ to the human brain. Now, how is
Yeah.
AI like that? It's not a question of scale, it's a question of data scale. Like, can you even visualize a petabyte or a yottabyte or an exabyte? No, you can't, right? You can't imagine
No.
trillions
No.
of data. And you can't imagine to see the patterns as these data interact with one another in a cause and effect way. So think of the climate system. Think about all the temperature variations and moisture variations and wind variations, all of the things that go up to making a climate system in the world, and all of those variables interacting in a complex way. Well, we can't see that stuff, but AI can. And so what we find in scientific discovery is that it's helping, for example, radiologists can detect, it can read an X-ray better than a radiologist. If you look at an X-ray, you and I look at an X-ray, and you're at the doctor, and the doctor says, look at that over there. You could be forgiven for looking at the X-ray and saying, what do you mean? They can see things that we can't see on X-rays and EKGs. Have you ever seen an EKG printed out? It'll go, oh, look at that's a little. It doesn't. It looks like squiggles to us. AI is better than cardiologists and radiologists now, for the
Yeah.
most part. But it can also see things that they can't see because it can recognize patterns that are invisible to the human eye. And so when you combine all this medical data from patterns, whether it be genetic data, whether it be epidemiological data, whether it be molecular data from biomarkers, whether it be all of that, and you crunch all of that, you get an incredibly more accurate and more predictive view of health. Now, why is being predictive important? Because by the time you visualize something on an X-ray, a tumor, for example, it's got a billion cells.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
those billion cells may not have been quiescent. They may already have begun their migrations around the world, that their metastases that will eventually kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this new organ is like that. So there are people that say, who are just using it for making recipes or travel plans, it's like that. And you could be forgiven if you're using it in that way, or if you're using it at workplace as an email autoresponder, or to help you generate content and marketing. All of this will kind of be hidden away from you, perhaps. So I hope your business business listeners don't find this too nerdy,
No, this is
but this
good.
is where the gold is. So
This is,
this
you're
is the
right.
stuff that's going to be transformative right here. What do you think about that, Mr. Dalibor?
What you described, I think, is so lovely. This is, I think, the right mindset to look at this as an AI as an extra organ. And I love when you talk about telescopes. Of course, like we sit within our own galaxy. How could we imagine? How can we see the rest of our own galaxy by sitting within it? But let me just take it to a next level. When you zoom out, when you zoom out and you see actually galaxies cluster and you zoom further out, at some point you
Yeah,
see that there is a scaffolding of galaxies that form patterns of the universe as the largest of its
yeah.
scale.
It's just crazy.
So,
Just absolutely crazy.
right?
Yeah.
So that to me was a one-to-one description of how a trillion item complex system um, could actually be understood, that there are patterns that a bird's eye viewer can see that you actually simply cannot living within it. So that is actually, I'm going to start using this description to describe this new organ. Thank you for planting
Yeah,
this
yeah,
idea.
these are the kind of things that as I was writing this, because again, I left science 50 years ago, right? Or nearly 50 years ago, 45 years ago. God help, that's an awful long time. But as I was doing this research for the book, one of the things I began to use, I use GPT as a search tool. I always also use the web. I started researching AI and scientific discovery because I was curious to how it's affecting the sciences that I grew up with and loved, something like that. And I
Yeah,
discovered just a hidden world of beauty that had been missing for me because I'd been, like many people, focused on the business use cases, which are valuable and interesting. But this is the really sexy stuff. In the book, we talk about how AI will be transformative in each of these domains, and in each of these domains, the potential. And I'm talking about, by the way, in the next 25 years. I'm talking about the next two
yeah,
years.
that's yeah,
So, for example, one of the things that, and I'll just give one of these examples. One of the ways that molecules interact in the body is in a kind of lock and key fashion, right?
mhm,
So a
yeah,
neurotransmitter comes in and it hits the cell surface receptor. It activates that receptor, which does something in the cell. Neurons work that way. Hormones work that way. So that's a lock and key thing. And one of the things that we've learned to do in the 20th century and in the 21st century is you take this thing, that neurotransmitter, say, for example, and it's interacting with the receptor. Well, how do we make something that looks like this key over here, but doesn't activate in the same way? What you're talking about is SSRI drugs, for example,
yeah,
or immunosuppressant drugs. Is this, you can either block this receptor hole, or you can modify the key or make it something that looks like a key. So these are the ways that drugs often interact in the body. So to do how this lock and key thing, you have to understand the shape. Well, how do I understand the shape of these things that are, 10 to the -8 smaller than we can discuss, to see with the human eye, that are incredibly complex, that are folding, that are tumbling in space? We can't do that, except AI
yeah,
can.
yeah,
And the way that drug discovery was traditionally done was a sort of kind of a shotgun approach. So you'd create a lot of things that look like your key, yeah, that maybe have a little extra this here, or they have a chlorine here, or they have a sugar molecule here, or whatever like that. You create like a million of these, and then you shotgun them at the disease or the problem or whatever it is, and you see which ones stick against the wall. We always talk about throwing stuff against the wall and seeing one of it
yeah.
sticks.
That's an incredibly time-consuming thing, which is why drug discovery could take 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But now we understand, because we can use AI to understand the shape of the lock and the key, we can say we want something that has these qualities, and AI can begin to crunch through it. It does a material science too. In the same way, there's a database. You can say, this is the properties I want this material to have. I want it to be tough, resistant, stretch-resistant, corrosive, anti-corrosive, whatever these material properties are. And you can say, AI, well, think about how that would have to look like molecular construction in order to provide these kind of things. So this is just like warp speed
absolutely.
for drug
War-
discovery
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And so I think that's very exciting. So these are just some of the areas at which this incredible crunching power. And again, if you're just using it for recipes or to plan your diary or for marketing content, all of this will be like whatever. I don't know, but I hope it gives listeners an idea of really how exciting this could
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
why I'm a techno-optimist. I'm not a techno-optimist because it's going to streamline some business processes. I'm a techno-optimist because of this stuff right here.
Yes, and one of the aspects that you mentioned in the what else could it I actually see the next slide. What else could it teach itself? I
Oh, well,
love
I mean,
that.
this is this, my friends, is the question, right? So, and this is the stuff that's really exciting. So, this is why I'm a starry-eyed techno-optimist. Again, if you're just using it for recipes, you're forgiven for not knowing this stuff. So, this is the crazy thing. Chess, one of the most complex games known to human beings. We developed a computer that could beat a human being as early as 1987,
Yeah,
but we had to kind of brute force, and it took us decades and decades to get there. We had to brute force teach this thing to play chess. We had to teach it chess strategy and chess theory and chess opening positions and all of that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And while it could be classified as an AI, or those early chess computers, the more interesting case was when we took a computer, and this is only relatively recently, and told it like the rules of chess, like the way the bishop moves or the chess moves, and said, don't teach it anything else about the game.
Yeah.
And we told it, okay, have at it. Play games about it. How long, if you don't know this story, listeners, I want to ask you, how long would it take that thing to be one of the best in the world, to
To
beat any
solve
human or
effectively
any
to solve chess.
yeah, solve chess so you could crush anyone,
Yeah.
the
So
best grandmasters and the best computers. How long do you think playing against itself using this thing called reinforcement learning? You make a stupid move, you lose the game. Okay, well, that wasn't right. So we need to
let's do
revise
that
our strategy
again.
for the next
Okay.
game.
Yeah.
How long to become the best in the world at chess? And, you could be forgiven for thinking a week or a month or maybe a year. 4 hours.
4 hours.
4 hours. This thing could beat not only the best humans, but the best chess engines. It's called Alpha Zero. So that's an incredible thing. I mean, you think about chess as a game that has trillions of positions.
Yeah.
After just 20 moves, I can't remember how many there were, 17 trillion possible chess positions that it could be in. It can teach itself this in 4 hours. Now, okay, you guys will be listening, your business leaders, most of you, you think ho hum, there's a bunch of nerds talking about chess. But imagine this. What other problems could we point it at? As you said, Dalibor. Like, if you can do that in 4 hours, is solve one of the hardest games known to humanity. Solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Solve it. Yeah.
What problems could be pointed at? And what else could it do in 4 hours?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
first, yeah, get it. But getting the first computer to beat the first human, that's like 35 years work. This thing
Yeah.
did it in 4 hours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm like such a super techno optimist is stuff like that.
Yes.
I hope,
And now
hope
that is happening across all of our, that is happening right now today across all of our avenues of,
sciences.
yeah, all of our avenues of
Yeah,
inquiry, right?
yeah,
So
that's
from
right.
from math to cancer research. That's why this is important. And the pace of innovation is such that it is impossible to keep up. Well, in my perspective, and I'm following this daily. It feels to me like we are now. A few months ago, we were in like a breakthroughs are not happening now every month. The breakthroughs are happening every week.
Oh,
That
I
was
know.
3 months ago, and now it feels like breakthroughs are being announced every other day.
Yeah. I do
So
want to say something to listeners, though. Not all the problems that we face as humanity, not all the problems we face as business are thinking problems. So, not all of the things that happen in business are going to happen because we have this thing that's smart working alongside us. Why is that? Because this gigaspeed calculating engine, even if it's developing super powered intellectual solutions, hits this human world
yeah,
with its politics, with its culture, with the resistance to change, with its leaders
yeah.
that don't know what's up. All of this kind of cognitive thinking hits problems that are very human. And it's one of those things I say in one of my books is that the more advanced technology becomes, the more important a human becomes. Because this thing, people talk about the horse race, the LLM horse race. Is it smart? And how smart is it? Is this one smarter than that one? Is it really
Yeah.
thinking or whatever? It's plenty smart enough for anything that we want to do inside a business.
Mhm,
Anything
mhm, mhm,
already.
mhm.
The problem is the adoption problem.
Yeah.
And the problem is not with the AI, because ChatGPT 4.5, again, is smart enough to do anything that you want to do with it in business.
Mhm,
When it hits this human world,
mhm.
that's where, as they say, the rubber hits the road. And so that's the interesting stuff. Is it smart enough? Because it is. And even if we stopped AI development now, even if all the guys in Silicon Valley, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Sundar Pichai, and all of that, and they stopped any progress on AI, it would still take the adoption like 5 or 10 years to catch up. Like that's how far behind we are.
So let's talk.
So anyway,
Let's talk about adoption. I mean, this is the meat of the
yeah,
book. In the middle part, you're talking about
yeah,
adoption. You're
yeah.
introducing a framework. I would love if you could share with us maybe some of that material.
Well, yes, maybe the way to describe it is most technology in organizations uh, is designed with it, implemented with a top-down thing. So IT in collaboration with business strategists and the leadership team decides this is the technology that we're going
Yeah,
to use that's going to streamline our business enterprise. So it's very much top-down. And then what you do is you persuade the users to like it and to want to use it.
that's
And
right.
that's where this thing called change management comes in. Is you
That's a
shove in the
very that's a
technology,
what a great
Salesforce,
simple.
CRM, whatever it is,
You're right.
SAP for S/4HANA, whatever it is, and then you say, okay, let's get the rest of the organization aligned with the new technology.
Let's make sure we tempt the user to like it.
Yeah, technology first, and then let's get the
User to like.
organization to adopt it, right? So in a way, you could be accused of saying this is the technology tail
First.
wagging the dog, the
Correct.
organizational dog.
Bingo.
I don't think that was going to work as well as for AI because AI is much more flexible and much more powerful. So it's what's called a general purpose technology. And inside business, its uses are general. So its uses in finance are different than the uses in logistics and operations, are different than the use cases in human resources, are different than the use cases in marketing, are different than the use cases for strategy and decision making at the top. It's too general for this kind of one top
Top
down, one
down.
size fits all. Let's put in SAP, which I love
Yeah.
SAP, but it's not SAP.
This is actually very true perspective. So I love how you describe it. You're absolutely right. Like the whole business of change management is exactly that. It's we've picked now the system. How do we get everybody in the organization to now enthusiastically adopt it and love it?
Yeah,
Which will mean that have to stop doing it the way that they know how and
sure.
are comfortable how, and they don't want to like
Yeah.
the whole industry around that. And now this changes the game. So, Paul, I love like you've stated the problems eloquently, and the solution is said is that this has it's the solution is it cannot do that. It has to be what bottom up, top down,
Well,
bottom up.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it's so infinitely flexible and powerful, a bottom up approach of experimentation or organizational democracy or emergent change or whatever language you want to put on it is let's give it to teams and teach them how to start to use it to solve their business problems. And that's already happening. So here's some good numbers for you. You'll love numbers. I know you're a statistics guy. 60% of people in organizations are already using this thing all the time, right? Without their bosses knowing, right?
Yeah.
They're using it to solve work problems. If you're in marketing, using it to generate copy, you'd be an idiot not to, right? It can generate copy in a nanosecond, which it would take you a day to do
Yeah.
yourself. So it's not that it's good copy, but it's a start. And we can talk later about how it's used in content creation if you wish. But so the use cases are different all over the business and that. And so let's give the tools to users and let's pull the technology towards business problems. Let's pull the technology towards customer solutions rather than push it
Yeah.
at the organization. And so that it speaks to a more bottom-up approach. Now, they're already using it. 60% are already using it. Most of them are doing it without their boss knowing it, although the boss have to be an idiot not to know that they're doing it, but say. And only 14% of people surveyed in organizations say that they're getting sufficient education and training and support to use AI the way they want to use AI. Now, think about that for a minute, right? We have this thing which the techno optimists like me would say is one of the most powerful technologies. And only 14% say that they're getting the support and the education and the training and the resources to use AI to solve business problems. So
So,
that's like a remarkable thing to me,
so
right?
why
I
is
mean,
it?
that's just like crazy. Like, what is going on? Why are we denying people the support to use the most powerful tool that they may have encountered in their business life? That's a
So,
great, that's the question.
so why do you think it is?
Why are we not? I think
Yeah.
partly, I think the senior leadership misunderstand the potential of the thing. So one of the things I do in the book, one of the things I spent most of my life doing is leadership development, right? And one of the things you do if you're a leadership development specialist like me is you begin to talk about how leaders learn. So you get a guy, he's a CTO or the CIO or is a CEO or wherever he is. You begin to work with him as either in a coach or he's in one of your programs. You say, how much do development you do a year? And they normally say, like, I go to conferences.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. Okay, that's good. That's knowledge, but that's not leadership, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It not that it's not important, but that's not leadership. What are you doing to develop yourself as a leader? I don't know. What do you mean by that? Well, do you read books? Well, I don't really have time for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are podcasts? Have you been on how many 1 week courses at Harvard Business School have you been on
Mhm.
to strengthen your leadership, your ability to lead teams? This whole human side of leadership, it's assumed that you know how to do that, but time to time you get to be the top of an organization.
Yeah.
It's assumed that it's bullshit, right? They're
Right
not.
on. You're right on.
Leadership is incredibly complex, much more like I've talked a lot about being a science nerd and the complexity and the beauty of science, but leadership is complex in a completely different way. And you'd be foolish to think it's not as important. And leading the human side of organizations, how you get organizations the size of IBM, 350,000 people or something like that, to align and point in the same direction, well, that's a challenge by itself. And they don't spend enough time developing themselves. So that's the leadership thing. They
That's
might spend, I remember I had a board in front of me. There were 12 guys and they were all men, right? Of course they are, right? Of one of the big professional services firm. And I said, how many days development did we do? Hold up the number of fingers. How many days development you did in the last 5 years? And there was like, you could see them sheepishly like putting up a finger like that. Like, there weren't 12 fingers in the room out of these 12 guys. It's because there's a default assumption at the top of organizations that if it's not important, if I don't know it, it's not probably not important. And if you do that with AI, you just misunderstand this potential of it, the transformative potential for your business, for your organization. It's like, and I just see so much ignorance around AI, even for people that should know better, that are leading big organizations.
so
So,
what you're saying really is that the first big gap is that
yeah,
leaders themselves
yeah,
do not have they do not have sufficient understanding of the promise, the potential, the risk, the what it is
yeah,
to be to be able to imagine how
yeah,
how it can actually be helpful to their organization. So That's a big issue. Probably there is another issue is even if they say, yeah, where would I go to learn? How can I like where would I go to learn? I think would be another question. There's another. I think there's a practical question of how safe are the systems? Are we okay to actually be using this in a proliferated way across our large enterprise? What risks are we exposing ourselves to? Right?
Oh, you mean huge risks. I mean, if 60% of your organization of 100,000 people, if 60% of them are using this stuff day in and day out, right? These people have no training in AI ethics. Now,
So
I
that's
don't
the
want to
counter. That's exactly
talk
the
about five
counter
chapters of the
argument.
book on AI ethics, but you're opening up a hornet's nest of ethical problems.
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, what
And
you're
unless
saying,
they
Paul,
understand
is
what's what, exactly.
what you're
And
saying
also, if
really is
people are
that.
experimenting with it, let's give them some education.
So in other words, the cat is out of the bag.
It
Like
is. It's
Genie
not
has
going back in the
left the
bag.
bottle, baby. 60% of people in
Yeah,
60% of your colleagues are already using this, and those are like not unapproved, that you are exposed to risk already.
sure.
So you
You
may
are.
as well put some parameters and bring this under some level of orchestration,
Yeah.
right? That's fair enough.
You
Yeah,
know
I
what
think,
some organizations are doing though? They're clamping down.
yeah,
Legal, compliance, risk management, all those guys are like, oh, we can't have this shit happening in the business. It's going to, it's too much risk. Well, one way to combat risk is, of course, is to say, okay, you guys over there marketing, you no more using AI for copy, or one of you guys in finance no more using AI for this. That's an approach to control the risk. It's stupid. It's
yeah,
narrow-minded, but
yeah,
legal. I know I'm more than one organization I've spoken to have thought about how do we experiment with this? How do we use it in our business? How do we help it strategically? How do we use it technically? All those kind of great questions. And legal has come in and said, over our dead body, like you cannot touch this stuff.
yeah.
And they've shut it down. I was working with a French company who's a consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods company, and legal basically says, don't touch this stuff. Now, that was 2 years ago, and maybe they've grown up and learned better. And I hear this over and over again, is the response to the great potential of this is to try and shut it down. Now, hopefully a lot of places are smarter than that. The other way that you can go with it is have it be a free-for-all. Well, that's stupid as well,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so what's in between that, and this is the people first approach, is let's give people some knowledge, particularly of ethics, but also practical knowledge and tools and skills, some basic knowledge, what the stupid thing is and what it does, or whatever, and have that fuel this culture of bottom-up experimentation. And so that's kind of the people first approach in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It seems to me, I mean, it seems to me that it's sort of countercultural and revolutionary. It ought not to be. This ought to be, to my opinion, as plain as apple pie, as a plain in the nose on anyone's face. But a lot of things happen in business that I think is kind of stupid. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this could be the time to actually for me to ask you the question that Sebastian submitted about other historical general purpose technology, because what you're actually describing, you're describing AI as a general purpose capability now
Mhm.
that can be pointed to a whole bunch of to anything,
Sure.
right? So Sebastian asks, is there a historical general purpose technology that can offer us guidance as we navigate now through this, future of AI or AGI?
Well, general purpose technologies only really come along once every generation or once every 100 years. So the last one I can think of before this would have been the internet.
Yeah,
Before that would probably be the mainframe
electricity.
computer and the thing, maybe in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Before
Yeah,
that, maybe the automobile, but definitely electricity,
electricity for sure. Yeah.
writing, the printing press. So when we're talking about a general purpose technology, something that's truly transformative, those are our candidates. So one
You
of the
know,
things that's
so Paul,
yes,
I think the
yeah,
people are comparing this to internet. Like we are kind of at that stage of where internet World Wide Web
sure,
was in
yes.
1992.
Well, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I think that's actually a very good. It's a good model. I think though that maybe even closer would be the electricity proliferation, the electricity, because it
Yeah.
is so ubiquitous and so everywhere. And I think that this we're going to see that here too. We're going to see AI devices, capable AI devices, encapsulated in everything.
Yeah. This is definitely in the book, and I think it's interesting because electricity was discovered by the Greeks 2,500 years ago. But let's say Benjamin Franklin and his kite began to
Yeah,
reconcile the forces of the universe with these forces here. So anyway, that was 1740, if I recall correctly, my U.S. history. But electrification didn't happen until like 1860, 1880, the invention of the light bulb, the development of the first
yeah,
power plant. Okay, so you think, okay, well, that took us 2 millennia to sort of harness this thing, get it under the hood. But that would have unleashed thing. Well, no, actually, it didn't. So the first domestic use case was 1908. It was a toaster. So that's like 30 years after the first power generation plant is that there was a domestic use case, and it
mm.
was a toaster, right? So if you think about that,
Good,
technology
good.
adoption goes much more slowly, and we realize the benefits much more slowly than you think that we ought to.
Mm.
So the toaster was 1908, and the radio was I think 1916, and the television was 1936,
Yeah,
and all of these things. The supercomputer was the computer was 19 depends on what you count, but 1943. The semiconductor was
yeah, yeah.
1987. Like these things take a long time to develop, and why is that? Is because if you think about cars, when the car was invented
The
1870
infrastructure was
by
lacking. Yeah.
Mercedes-Benz. The Model T was 1910. Dude, it's just like a lot of years in between. Why? Is because why would you build cars where there's no roads or gas
Yeah, the
stations?
infrastructure was lacking. Exactly.
Infrastructure is missing. And why would you build roads or gas stations if there's nothing to go on them? So this is the problem with AI is you hit these ecosystem problems. So this is perhaps an answer to your question, Sebastian, is these general purpose technologies aren't reliant on just the technology to do what the technology is supposed to do, but it's required on all these ecosystem effects
Yeah.
for us to realize the benefit. And also something as powerful as LLMs or large reasoning models or whatever you like to pick, frontier AI models, is they're already super powerful. And what we're running into is the capabilities of human systems to deploy them, to make
Mm.
use of them, to adapt and adopt them. So
Ooh, you
that's
took
an
it.
answer. I hope that's an
Oh,
answer to your question, Sebastian.
Paul.
Thank you for asking it.
Oh, you went different direction. I love it. I thought so. So here is. I thought what you were going to say is that new technology exists. It needs infrastructure to actually be deployed and impactful.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, for the AI, technology infrastructure kind of exists. It's the technology that we are using right now. It's the computers, it's the
Well, that's
internet.
the that yeah, but that's a technology below it.
That's right. But what
What
you're
about the
saying is
tech?
that the infrastructure of humans.
Yes. Yes.
That's an interesting twist to this story here, and I think you're absolutely right. That will be now the wetware, the wetware infrastructure needs to be, I guess, present, conducive to the leverage of the technology that we now already have.
Yes, yes.
And that then takes us into, I think, the third chapter of the book, the third part of the book, which is about ethics, about governance. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, I've been a professor of business ethics, and I've been interested in business ethics for 25 or 30 years. I was on the board of the Academy of Management as a representative of business ethics. Uh, Business ethics is the redheaded stepchild, as they say. It's a subject nobody likes if they're busy innovating or creating custom value or whatever they are. Some ethicist standing over their shoulders saying, "Should you be doing that?" And there's a great question it came from Jurassic Park, where the mathematician, before the dinosaurs and the velociraptors go nuts, he said, "Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could do something, they never thought about whether they should do something."
Yeah.
And that's the ethical question for artificial intelligence is not can we do this, but should we do it? And we're not trained as business people to think often enough about that. And so, one of the things that I've spent a lot of my recent career as a professor talking about is all of the ethical disasters that have punctuated our business life. When we kind of roll with the punches, there's 2008 derivatives meltdown. There's Wells Fargo. There's
Yeah.
the Deepwater Horizon that exploded in the Gulf of. I guess I better call it the Gulf of America now.
Yeah, for
Otherwise,
America.
they'll deport me. The Deepwater Horizon cost $60 billion. The Exxon Valdez, Bhopal chemistry. These things. The pharmaceutical industry and Wall Street are like, every 3 or 4 years, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. We all clutch our pearls and
Yeah.
hope things that will be different. Well, yeah. So as a business ethicist, AI has way more ethical difficulties and troubles and potential and issues than any of that stuff. Way more complex. And what's happening now is you have this shadow AI deployment from the bottom up, where people are
Yeah.
using it because
Yeah.
it helps them with their work. And you have this top-down stuff coming in, which people saying there's turnkey AI solutions. I think Salesforce has Agent Force or something like that, and
Yeah.
SAP's got their AI stuff, and all of this stuff's coming
Everybody. Yeah.
down the pike at you from top down. Zoom is transcribing this meeting, all these things, but we're not thinking sufficiently about the ethical training that everybody who's using it have to have, because ethical breaches happen in the bowels of the organization. I mean, they happen often with direction from the top, but it's the behaviors that we have at the coalface.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Engineers at Volkswagen who decided I can make something that's going to be, smart enough to defeat the emissions test. Do you think I should stick it in here? Yeah, whatever. What could
Yeah.
go wrong? Well, what went wrong is 15 billion in fines or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So business ethics is really important. There are 5 chapters in it. I don't think we have enough time to launch into the framework, but I think they're interesting insofar as because it's a general purpose technology and because it's incredibly powerful technology, there are more ethical risks accompanying AI deployment than with any technology. And I've been in technology deployment like my whole business career, 35 years, right? So this is
Yeah.
worse. It's better and it's worse. And like Dario Avade says, he says not only is the potential far greater than anyone is saying, but also the risks are far greater than anyone is saying. And I think that maybe be a good place to leave the discussion. I don't know, how are we on time, my friend?
We are approaching time.
We're approaching.
So thank you, Paul. This was really fantastic. The book is awesome. I think like if anyone is really interested to understand and contextualize the full story of AI from like the beginnings, where it started, to where we are at now, the promise and the risk of where we are heading, with a focus on how to actually approach adoption. And
Yeah.
what I really like about, by the way, forgot to mention this. It says adopting AI the people first approach. The
Mm.
first spot where I go to when I read a title like that is that this is a business book and it's focused on adopting
Yeah.
AI within an organization.
Yeah. It started life as a business book. I'm not sure it's a business book anymore.
That's what I was going to say. When you say adopting AI the people first approach, actually it goes beyond the
Yeah.
constraints of an organization, and the
Yeah.
book actually touches on the promise of, not promise, but it calls for us to think about adopting AI people first approach for people, for humanity, for us. And I think that's
Yes.
actually really, really
It's got a
important.
little bit of Yuval Harari in it. It's got a
Yeah.
little bit of Steve Jobs in it. It's got a little bit of everything. What it's evolved into is a book. It's number one in Australia in technology and society. Now, I didn't set out to write a book on technology and society, but that's the way people are receiving it. There was a great book that came out in 2024 called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. I think he's at Stanford, or no, he's not at Stanford. He's at Wharton. It's the best book of 2024 on AI. I think a lot of people agree it's a pretty damn good book. Where I'm hoping this is for 2025, because literally this book was finished on March the 17th. We were still, and this is the horrible thing about writing a book on AI, is because we finished the book when we published it on March the 17th. 4 days later, it's like there was a new LLM release.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
And now ChatGPT 5 is coming out. And every time I finish a chapter of this damn book, so the book is about up to as minute
Yeah.
as it's possible to be.
Yeah.
But it's also broader. It's also
Yeah.
big picture stuff because I think that's the interesting stuff. Now, a lot of the work I'm doing with clients and when I give keynotes and workshops and everything like that is the nuts and bolts and the micro stuff and the day to day is like, how do I get this to work? But I think the big picture stuff's really interesting. So I hope that readers and listeners appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for sharing your wisdom with us. The session is recorded. We'll post it on YouTube shortly. I look forward to staying in touch with you, Paul. All the very best and have yourself a lovely Thursday.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye bye.
All the best.